It is day 39 of the war in Iran. I have spoken way more than 100,000 words on the subject at this point. Yet we have not discussed at length any militant attacks from non-state actors. Within Iran, no militant group has opened up a guerrilla front in the war. No militant groups have attacked the government either, as far as we know. Something similar is also happening outside of Iran, which is where we will spend our time today. No militant groups have attacked the United States. The most that we have observed are a handful of lone wolf incidents, often with loose connections to Iran. Those are concerning, yes, but not at the same level as something organized by a network with multiple cells. There was a Shia group in Iraq that kidnapped an American journalist named Shelley Kittleson, but that feels disconnected from the process and has correspondingly received relatively little media coverage. In fact, the closest things that we can get to true action from a militant group are Israel opening up a front against Hezbollah, the Yemeni Houthis trying to remind the world that they still exist, and a potential upstart group striking various European countries. The Hezbollah thing does not really count because it was ongoing at the time of the Iran war's start. The Houthi thing took a while to arise and has been fairly muted. And Europe is Europe, which makes the situation all the stranger given that the continent is trying to stay out of the war. With anger on every side of the equation, the lack of something more serious on Trump's side of the Atlantic might come as a bit of a surprise. Yes, the Arab governments do not appear to be in a hurry to end the war, and it is hard to gauge public opinion in those corresponding countries, but there are plenty of ordinary citizens in the region angry with the United States and Israel. Moreover, it does not take a majority to cause a problem, just a very motivated few. Along those lines, you may remember how militant groups have a perverse business model. Committing attacks drives greater support to their organization, both in terms of money and manpower. Sometimes that support comes from governments, like an Iranian government that developed an entire axis of resistance. And thus, with an upswell of latent demand to support semi-formalized resistance, we might expect a corresponding upswell in semi-formalized resistance. But it is mostly crickets out there. So, today, let's try to crack the puzzle here, as we fire things up to scare those crickets away. We will start with what the Houthis have been up to, or not up to, because the answer there is clearer. After that, we will go to the stranger case of what is happening in Europe. Then we will cover a bizarre political situation that the United States finds itself in. And finally, I will speculate what Iran's thinking might be about all of this. But to the Houthis we go. It was less than a year ago that the United States was bombing the group in retaliation for their strikes on shipping in the Red Sea. Well, the Houthis are back at it, launching some missiles at Israel, and threatening to shut down the strait. Not that one. Why did the game designer have to give us two key choke points right next to each other on this map? Although the current Houthi actions are in response to Israel's strikes on Hezbollah, the earlier shutdown of the Bab el-Mandab Strait was in response to the Gaza war. And the Houthis did indeed expand their reputation as a consequence of that campaign. This is normally where I would cite some numbers to back that claim. Unfortunately, the Houthis do not publish recruitment or fundraising numbers, so we will have to stick to just the vibes on that one. Fast forwarding to now, the reason that the Houthis took so long to do anything, and then still have not done much, is because they no longer have access to their main patron. They endured 2 months of Operation Rough Rider because they could receive resupplies from Iran. Today, however, Iran is in no position to offer the same support. The government has its hands full with the United States. The imperative for the Houthis right now is to conserve ammunition to deter the United States or Israel from getting too adventurous. The missiles lobbed at Israel succeeded in getting the Houthis back into the conversation, case in point now, but it would be surprising for more to happen there. But goodness, that would have significant consequences. With Hormuz blocked, Saudi Arabia is partially piping oil westward to ship out of the Red Sea. If the Bab el-Mandab Strait also gets blocked, Saudi oil would have to travel through the Suez Canal and go all the way around Africa to deliver anything to Asia. Yikes. Actually, this discussion serves as a partial answer to the puzzle that the rest of this video examines. It may be true that the war has increased public support for militant groups to take action, but if that increase is more than offset by the loss in reliable support from Iran, then the rest of the story is academic, and the United States and Israel have achieved one of their main goals of the conflict. The flip side is that there has been some more serious motion, but the group has only been active in Europe. This story has been easy to miss if you live in the United States, and it has important implications for those on the other side of the Atlantic. So let's spend a moment taking a tour of the continent. On March 9th, it was a synagogue in Liège, Belgium. On March 13th, it was another synagogue in Rotterdam, Netherlands. On March 16th, it was an IED detonated in Amsterdam, apparently aiming to hit BNY Mellon. On March 23rd, it was ambulances run by Jewish volunteers in London, England. On March 24th, it was a car set on fire in Antwerp, Belgium. On March 28th, it was a foiled attack on a Bank of America branch in Paris, France. The entity behind these attacks? Likely Yashab al-Yamin, which has either claimed each of those attacks or is suspected of being behind them. The group basically appeared out of nowhere in March, apparently seeking to capture public attention in a heated moment. No one is really sure who is behind the organization. Both Israeli and European officials have expressed the belief that it could just be Iran trying to rebrand with plausible deniability. Besides the group generally existing, there are two important points to raise here. 1. Europe has done little in response beyond policing actions. In the model that views attacks as fundraising campaigns, this is not a good strategy. The trade-off a group must make is that the attacks serve as advertisements, but come with the drawback of inciting a response from the target, which might ultimately leave the group in a worse position. But if you can attack without a response, you get to run your perverse commercial without the risk of blowback. That makes the target all the more attractive for the next set of attacks. I know that Europe views the Iran operation as not their war. That is understandable given that European countries did not start it, and the United States barely consulted them during the lead-up. But continued attacks from Iran despite that will make it Europe's war one way or another. Second, these are armed attacks in the North Atlantic area. Someone at some point might raise an Article 5 question, which seems like the perfect chaos cherry on the top of a fun Sunday of this year in NATO politics. Heading back to the United States, things have been comparatively quiet so far. So far are the operative words here, because militant groups are not always prepared to attack overnight, especially when they might have to set up operations on the opposite side of the Atlantic. Subtle reminder that the United States radicalized some individuals in the Middle East by setting up bases during the Gulf War, but it took 10 years for the United States to truly notice, even if that group had been active in the meantime. Put differently, do not get comfortable because more than a month has passed without serious incident. Still, there are plenty of short-run vulnerabilities that the United States needs to worry about. Iran basically gave the world a blueprint for this by attacking the US Embassy in Iraq a few times. Most notably, this incident, where a drone loitered over the place long enough to give everyone on the internet a great tour of the compound. Bear in mind that Iraq is supposed to be more fortified than most places, so if it is possible there, it is possible most everywhere. We have also discussed at length all of the security risks just on the other side of the border with Mexico, so I will not drone on about those. But we should be at least cognizant of the possibility that the Iranian government survives this war and starts to replenish its stockpiles. One wonders if a Mexican cartel might actively work with Iran, if the financial prospects are right. Beyond those straightforward bits, there is a more complicated domestic politics story here worth exploring. For a month and a half, the Transportation Security Administration had been cut off from federal funding. This was congressional Democrats' strategy to try to restrict ICE from freezing normal social life in many large U.S. cities. ICE falls under the Department of Homeland Security, so Democrats initiated a partial government shutdown on just that department. The consequences were interesting. TSA agents, also under the Department of Homeland Security, missed multiple paychecks. They then started to call out of work, creating huge lines at airports. Hey, we all like lines, but not those lines. Meanwhile, ICE just ran like normal. They may also be under the unfunded Department of Homeland Security, but an earlier appropriations bill had funded them for the foreseeable future. This created a bizarre situation where the Trump administration assigned ICE agents to assist in airport security, which had little practical impact because they are not trained for those jobs. To be clear, this is how shutdowns work. The minority party targets something, or everything, completely unrelated to the intended target, to force action on that particular issue, here placing new restrictions on ICE agents. But there was a clear political liability with this particular strategy. As it stands, Democrats look like they are in prime position for massive midterm gains come the November election. One of the few things that could plausibly turn that around would be an attack on the aviation industry. The political ads write themselves. Democrats refuse to fund the TSA, and now 100 people are dead. Now, I understand that you personally might not feel that way, and moreover, you might ultimately blame Trump for creating the conditions for such an attack. But that ad is not targeted at you. It is targeted at independent voters who traditionally vote Republican and are worried about that exact type of issue. And it will be effective. TSA agents started to get paid again on March 30th as a part of a Trump executive order that the courts will soon have to address. But this remains a topic of debate in Congress, and I am not sure that congressional Democrats are fully internalizing the risk here. Finally, we should briefly think about Iran's own incentive to promote attacks on the US homeland at the moment. In the last week, we have had a recurring theme of how this war is almost exclusively being fought in Americans' pocketbooks, rather than on the battlefield. Tehran wants nothing more than to run up the scoreboard at the gas pump, in the hopes that Americans will push Trump out of Iran. Hence the nuclear option of closing the Strait of Hormuz, and all of the fun that has come with that. As it stands now, I would describe this strategy as working, with the caveat that working is not the same as has worked, and there is still a long way to go before the former converts to the latter. Never mind that many more bombs will be dropped in the meantime, and we might have to get another new Supreme Leader, assuming the current one is alive at all. My stick figure budget here is running low, so I am hoping that this will end sooner than later. The point is, if your strategy is trending in the right direction, it is a bad idea to start taking reckless swings. Employing a high variance tactic is smarter when there is less downside risk. Consequently, Iran might not want to encourage these types of attacks for the time being. No rally round the flag effect has emerged for Trump yet. As hinted at before, you could also imagine that no rally round the flag effect would emerge even if the US homeland were hit. But the whole thing could backfire spectacularly if that expectation is wrong. And the trajectory of the Iran war indicates that Iran may be better served by the more conservative approach. So, what are our takeaway lines for today? The Houthis just want to stay relevant, but cannot do much more. Europe may be the only place where Iran or its proxies are making a play. There are a handful of vulnerabilities that the United States faces, but Iran is playing with fire if it tries to exploit any of them. Serenity now here on the main channel, but pop over to Lines on Maps Extra if you want to hear an unhinged version of me discussing war plans. And if you enjoyed today's video, then please like, share, and subscribe, and I will see you next time. Take care.